You are able to read more about our project here, Digital Business Transformation, at the homepage here. Also at this page, you can read more about what the participants has gained from the cooperation with the Alexandra Institute, the Danish Technological Institute, and or the Danish Technological University. But first, a bit about the background for this webinar. Grundfos participated in another project, Big Data Business Academy, which we carried out for the Danish Industry Foundation back in 2016 to 2018. Back then, Grundfos described that digital ambitions and reason for participating in this video. And I'd like to show this to you as a warm-up for our webinar.
Vi har valgt at starte vores digitale boosterprojekt som en del af et større initiativ omkring digitalisering. Digitalisering for os handler om IoT, så Internet of Things, hvad kan vi bruge det til? Men i den grad også at skabe noget forretning ude ved nogle slutbrugere, som vi eventuelt ligger ude hos i dag. Og et af vores kerneprodukter, det er vores boostersystemer. Og så tænkte vi, hvorfor ikke starte et sted, hvor vi har noget kernebusiness, og så har vi et behov for at bygge noget digitalisering rundt om det produkt. Da det er meget nyt for os at tale om digital forretning, så kan vi heller ikke bruge de metoder, vi plejer at anvende. For vi ved endnu ikke, hvad det er for nogle muligheder, vi får ved at samle data op. Så en ting er, at vi samler data op omkring, hvordan pumpen har det. Når den begynder at få feber, som vi kalder det, så er der nogen, der skal gå ud og justere lidt på den. Hvis den virkelig får feber, jamen så skal man måske gå ud og justere noget andet, eller hvis den virkelig brækker et eller andet, så skal vi gå ud og skifte en dims. Jo bedre vi kan blive til at forudse, hvad det er, der sker, jo bedre service kan vi give vores kunder, og jo bedre kan vi sikre dem en oppetid i deres system. Det er sådan et stort mål, vi har. Hvordan prissætter man det? Det må vi prøve at gå i dialog med vores kunder om, og finde ud af, hvilken værdi er det for dem. Kan vi tage en byrde frem ved, at vi drifter det for dem, eller er det bedre for dem selv både at eje og drifte det? Det er sådan nogle ting, vi gerne vil stifte bekendtskab med i det her digitale boosterprojekt. Det kan godt være, at vores forretning om nogle år er en forretning, som lever i højere grad af service, end den lever af rent produktsalg. Vi er ikke i tvivl om, at det produktsalg, vi har i dag, med de her verdens bedste produkter, som vi har på tværs af rigtig mange af vores pumpefamilier, at det er hardware-salget, der også vil drive meget af vores forretning fremadrettet. Vi tror dog også, at vi bygger et andet ben på, ved at kan tilbyde det netop som en service. At du måske som husejer kan lease et produkt. Nu har vi et produkt, der ikke altid er set som det mest sexede produkt i et hjem. En pumpe i kælderen, der sikrer, at du får varme og vand. Det er ikke alle, der synes, det er super interessant. Men for dig som husejer kan det være på sigt, at du ikke gider at bøvle med det. Du gider ikke at have en installatør rendende, en VVS-mand, der skal hjælpe med at skrue på ting og sager. Du vil bare gerne have, at der er vand i dit hus, og der er varme i dit hus, og det er den service, du betaler for. Så det kunne man godt forestille sig, at vi kunne bevæge os derhen. Det bedste råd, vi kan give andre, som gerne vil i gang med at udnytte både egne data og eksterne data, det er at komme i gang. Jeg tror ikke, at vi kan sætte os ned og blive ved med bare at tale om det og tænke over det. Vi er simpelthen nødt til at prøve at gøre noget. Så derfor tror vi meget på at sætte sig ned med et team, finde nogle medarbejdere, som er passionerede for det, som de beskæftiger sig med. Det er mange af de udviklere, vi har med her, også forretningsfolk. De skal have et vist talent for, at det her det kan ske. Hvis det er nogen, der har prøvet det før i andet regi, vil det være fantastisk. Og så skal det jo passe ind i organisationens behov som det tredje. Og det har vi. Vi har et behov for at tilbyde vores slutbrugere kunder andet end bare hardware, nemlig nye services.
And I think also I have heard Grundfos' CEO, Mads Snipper, refer to digitalization as the one thing that can result in that Grundfos is not here in 10 years. I believe it's hard to imagine a company with around 20,000 employees wouldn't be here in 10 years. But I think this statement stresses that Grundfos is a business that really takes digitalization very seriously, and therefore going from a traditional business focus on products. I believe it's, in my opinion, a service-oriented company with a digital business model is a different beast than a product or traditional company. As you can see here, as illustrated, in a traditional company, you produce a product which is pushed to your customers. But with the digital business model, a solution to a specific context based on a demand from an end user is offered. And we believe that a transformation from one state of being into another brings out deep changes to strategy, culture, management, and organization. And therefore, I've also stressed here that going from a product-focused manufacturing company to a service-oriented sales organization really is much about change management. Therefore, I have put digital transformation with bold types. We believe that you always should think business, organization, and technology, and in that order. So you should select the technologies to use on the basis of business ideas and execution needs, and not the other way around. I don't know, Fredrik, if that's the way you sees it at Grundfos, and the way you have dealt with it. You're welcome to do your presentation now.
Thank you, Jan. Yes, I can absolutely agree to that, and I will share in this presentation a very transparent and honest view on how it is to execute a digital transformation in a quite big company. I know that many of you who are listening in today are coming from smaller companies, but the main logic, the key things are the same. So I think I hope you can bring a lot of learnings into the work you do to come out on the other side as a stronger version of yourself. For us, the transformation has very much been to move from selling pumps in boxes, which we have spent the last decades, to become a really successful business globally, selling more than 17 million pumps per year in boxes through distributors and different channels, to now move into services. And the ultimate goal of us is to deliver water as a service. So I will take you through the journey we have been on for the last 3 years, and give you some tips and tricks along the way. But first, a few words on Grundfos. You all know Grundfos as a company, but maybe you don't know what we are doing now. We are looking into the big problems of the world. We have restated our purpose to really solve the big challenges. So one of the problems we are trying to solve is that the fact that 2.1 billion people lack access to safe water. Next, Jan.
Yeah.
We live in a world where we are threatened by CO2 emissions, and 80% of the CO2 emissions comes from energy production, and 40% of that energy is consumed in the buildings we live and work in. So we can innovate to change that. If we take the next. We live in a world where no less than 30% of the water we produce leaks out in the networks we have designed to distribute it. So a lot of leakages. Some cities have up to 60-70% of the water leaks out in the networks. In Denmark and Sweden, it's less, but it's still around 10-20%, which is a huge amount. So we can innovate to change that. Next one. And we live in a world where 70% of the water consumption we humans have goes into producing the food we eat. So we can be part of innovating around that to make sure that water consumption is optimized. Next one. So when I was contacted by Grundfos 3 years ago, a little bit more than 3 years ago, I got a call and I discussed with Mads what he wanted to do. He said digital is either what will kill us or what will strongly take us to the future. So he as a leader of a big corporate had understood that digital is here to change the game for us. And he explained to me the journey Grundfos was on to. He explained it as we are a water and energy efficiency company that just happens to be the largest pump manufacturer in the world. So he was really transitioning from, being this boring pump manufacturer to become a sustainability company that do good and at the same time do well in business. So I was very attracted by that those statements. So we had a really good dialogue about what I could do to help them. I came in as I've been a serial entrepreneur my entire life, so I built companies in the startup arena, very much focused on sustainability and using the latest technologies. So I was recruited in from my last adventure from Telenor, who acquired one of my companies. So I have spent time there in a big corporate for 3 years and learned how the big companies were struggling with taking on digital, and I could see patterns, and I thought it was very interesting to actually climb on board on the customer side of the technology and execute the transformation. So I was coming on board in May 17, and then when I had signed up, Mads told me, it is our ambition to make the smartest and most intelligently executed digital transformation in any industrial company. Welcome on board, Fredrik. So no pressure, but actually that quote inspired me very, very much. As an entrepreneur, you always try to do something smarter than the competition and the others. And one thing you have learned then is that you cannot just do it the same way as all the others are doing. You need to take a different route. You need to think different. So if you take the next slide.
Yeah.
What we really did day one, as Marianne also pointed out, was to go out and talk to the end users. Because if we do not understand how they are affected by digital, it's very difficult for us to navigate. So we went out talking to a lot of end users of our pumps. And this is just one example on what they said. Olivia from Siemens, big customer to us, she said, normally we used to replace your pumps proactively, but we don't do that anymore because we monitor the pump condition now. And as a direct result, we buy a lot of less pumps. So they were using IoT, AI to monitor the pumps they have bought to optimize the usage of them. So instead of changing them on a scheduled manner, they change them when needed, or they fix them when needed. So, and this is of course the new reality. This is what the technology enables, and we could either then decide to okay, this is the new reality. We have to scale down Grundfos because our customers are buying less pumps from us. That's actually good from a sustainability perspective, but it's of course affecting our business on the top line negatively. So we could adapt and still be a profitable company, but we could also step in the new reality to deliver those kind of services to our customers, more smart pumps, more digital offerings. So that's what we decided to do. So if you take the next slide. So this is the purpose and the strategy of Grundfos. This is our recently launched 2025 strategy. And as you can see, we have put in the center point the purpose to pioneer solutions to the world's water and climate challenges and improve quality of life for people. So have really stop talking about pumps. No, we talk about those big challenges. And then we have put up 2 major transformations to enable this strategy to happen. Moving into water solutions and doing digital solutions. And then we want to become very big in what we do. And as you can see to the to the right down corner, we have actually put a sustainability index on our KPIs. So everyone in the company are measured on how well we do in our sustainability transformation. So I think this is really pointing out that this is not just a poster on the wall in the lobby of Grundfos. This is how we live. This is what we do. Next slide. So when I came on board 2017 in May, there had been a work going on, Marianne and Mads and a few other leaders in the company have been in a digital task force to find out what do we need to do as a company, and they had come up with those 4 lighthouses. These are areas we need to address in our digital transformation. First one being that we will have a different type of relations with our customers and end users. We need to be very much more attractive in the digital interactions with more attractive web pages and user experiences when you interact with us. We need to connect our products to internet and use data analytics to optimize. We need to experiment with new business models, introducing service offerings instead of only boxed products. And we need to look through our value chain and digitize it, utilize Industry 4.0 to create the factory of the future and so on. So these were the 4 areas where we started activities back in 2017. Next slide. One thing that Mads and I discussed very much when I should come on board and we should make is the smartest transformation. Normally what we saw other companies do, they took on board a quite expensive guy like myself to become the CDO, sit in the group management and represent digital. And what they often do was to build up a digital division, managing all the digital offerings. And we could see that that's actually not a very smart thing, because you create political tensions and competition internally, because the business units you have, they also want to step in digital and they want to move into the new world. So having a separate digital division was not a good thing. So we said, why don't we make my role temporary, and I get a timeline to execute the transformation, and when I'm done I get fired, and I get a quite significant budget. Then I can actually be quite interesting to work with from the owners of the business units. So they would come to me, and I could help them, to go into the future. So we designed our transformation as an upgrade of Grundfos and not building a new division. This is one of the main success factors in our transformation, to do it like that. That's also why I got fired a month ago, because we were done. I will come back to that. Next slide. So this is the approach we took. Instead of building 2 organizations, we said, let's take the great core organization that we already have and add digital capabilities to create the new core of Grundfos, a core capable of both developing and bringing to market a combination of physical and digital offerings. And this picture is the most well-known picture from Grundfos digital transformation. It has been a lot of photos taken on this one. Super simple picture, but that's really doing the trick. So if it's one picture you should keep from today, is this one. Think about new capabilities, add them into your company, and come out stronger on the other side. Next page. So these are the 5 capabilities that we decided to build in Grundfos. I think it goes for most companies that these are capabilities you need to address and you need to have. So we looked into how will we look like 5 years from now? What kind of company will we be, and what capabilities do we need? And then we saw what we already have, and we saw gaps. So we came up with those 5. The first one, digital engineering. How do we use digital tools to engineer our products smarter and faster through simulation? How do we incorporate IoT? How do we have a cloud infrastructure to connect to and apply data analytics? Second one, data analytics. How do we make value out of all the data that we can capture, not only from the pumps, but also from the interactions with our customers and other data sources? Third one, how do we take positions in the emerging digital ecosystems, and how do we create partnerships with smaller companies to innovate faster in the digital space? Because here it's all about speed. The 2 furthest right ones are the really tricky ones. The go-to-market capability will change. So how do we upgrade our go-to-market capabilities to be able to sell also digital offerings directly to end users? And how do we have an as-a-service delivery capability in Grundfos? We actually can deliver both our new digital offerings as a service on a recurring basis to our end users, and also the outcome of our pumps as a service, or even water as a service. So really build up those capabilities across the organization. So this was basically my job, to make sure that we built those capabilities in less than 3 years. Next slide. And for that, we put up this very aggressive timeline. When we discussed how to do this transformation, we talked, Mads and the board of Grundfos, they talked about the timeline of 5 to 7 years. And I think that's very realistic from a full transformation perspective. But when you hire in an agent, a change agent like myself, to drive change, you cannot take too long time, because then business as usual tend to take over the focus. So if you do a very focused effort on a limited timeline, then you can keep focus and attention and create results that people look up to and get affected by. If you spread it out in a 5-year plan, it will take 5 years to do the same thing instead of 3 years. So we went for a 3-year plan, and we used the first year to create the foundation of our transformation. We created an office for the transformation, where a neutral place where people could work together, break down the silos to really work together in this task. We created the first version of our digital platform and our first pilots of digital offerings. And then during year 2, we prepared our setup for scaling, and year 3, it's all about scaling. Next slide. One thing that was very important when I came on board as a digital expert into a physical company was that if I only talk the language of digital, some people would really be curious, but most people would have difficulties. So I thought it was very important to talk the language of Grundfos, and what I could see was that we have done a number of transitions before. We were the first one actually inventing the pump. We were the first one putting an electric motor on the pump, and we were the first ones putting electronics in the pump. Very transformational efforts. And now we're stepping into the digital pump, where we add new capabilities into the pump again. So it's not that different from what we have done before. So I could gain trust in the organization by talking the language of the organization. Next slide. So, but as you said, Jan, technology is it's an important enabler, but you should really not start with that. And that's typically what happens when you come into a very engineering-focused company. All starts talking about technology, IoT, AI, how are we going to get this to work? They can drown in technology for a long time. And that's what I had seen most companies struggling with. It was quite easy to get the technology in place, but then the work starts, how are we going to use the technology? How are we going to transform the organization? How are we going to transform our offerings? So one of the first activities I did, and this is something I can recommend, was to take the hype out of technology. I took the quote of Mads. He had said that in the future our pumps will order their own spare parts. Super sexy if you are a pump manufacturer, that the pumps can order their own spare parts. So what I did was that I took 10 people from the organization. They were already in the company. I put them in a room for 3 days. I gave them some pizzas and beers. And out 3 days later, they came with a pump that ordered its own spare part. So it was not more difficult than that. All the technology is available. The trickiest part for the guys in the room were actually to get the order through SAP. But they managed to do that through a small software robot. So this was just to show this is not about technology. This is about how we use the technology. Next slide. Another thing we put focus on very, very early, and also something I would like to recommend, is to focus on scaling directly. Because it's very easy to run away in the experimental trap. You know, you make a lot of experiments, and you should do experiments. Don't get me wrong, but instead of doing hundreds of experiments and spreading all your resources very thin, you need to focus on a few things that you believe can scale. You may be right, you may be wrong, but you have to make some bets and focus on scaling quickly, because in the digital space, typically it's only 1 or 2 that takes the majority of the stake. The rest have to share the very small pieces that are left. So for us, it was very important to take positions fast in the opportunities we want to bring to market. And here, it is important to work on the scaling side with the organization at the same time as you work with the experimental side. So we build a bridge over the chasm, so we can be ready to scale our offerings as soon as they are successfully proven to be picked up by the customers. Next slide. So this is what we are doing, utilizing the enabling technologies, turning our pumps into IoT sensors. This is a quote from one of our product managers for submersible pumps. He says that our next product is an IoT sensor that also can move water. So you can see we are stop talking about pumps, we are talking about sensors. And I think this is a strong quote from a tech company like Grundfos. If you take the next slide, I will show you how we get the network effect of many pumps in a network. Our pumps are typically operating in different types of networks. And historically, we have only sold pumps one by one. We never see what they do. Now with IoT, we can see in the network effect what is going on in the network. How are the pumps working? And we can take that data to, if you move to the next slide, to create valuable offerings for our customers. All of a sudden, we can demand distribute water instead of just pumping. We can locate leakages in the networks. We can optimize energy consumption, and we can even contribute with peak shaving by shutting off pumps when the peak load arises in the electricity network to save energy. We can do condition and monitoring and predictive maintenance. Just some new use cases we have never been able to touch before that we now can do through the technology. So if you take the next slide, we call those offerings digital commercial offerings that brings value to our end users. We call them tools for our end users. Dear customer, dear Olivia at Siemens, we now have a tool for you so you can run your business more efficiently. And we have a recurring business model for those tools. We also use those tools ourselves in our own business transformation, moving from products to services. So we can actually use those tools to operate equipment on behalf of others. So moving towards new business models. Next slide. So this is just one example of one of the digital offerings we have been developing. It's called Wastewater Network Connect. This is an overview of a wastewater network here in Denmark, where the blue dots are pumping stations where we pick up data and we can control the pumps to optimize the operations. And here we have been able then to create new values for the end users, really working with them in the development of this service. What problems is it that we can solve for you, and what kind of value does that bring? So here we have been able to create overviews of what is the actual flow in the networks. We have been able to identify leakages, and we have been able to locate areas where we have to strengthen up the network, and we have also seen where we can, you know, reduce pump sizes and so on, to really optimize the network from a performance and energy consumption perspective. Super valuable tool. And just to give you how impactful this is, we have one customer in Germany. They didn't even have Grundfos pumps when they saw this offering for the first time, and they became customer to us for the digital offering because they need it in their operations. And then afterwards they have been buying more and more Grundfos equipment. So this has been a true enabler for our core business as well. Next slide. Talking about new business models, we came from a reality where we were selling pumps, and we had also pumps plus traditional service contracts where you pay a little bit extra to get something perhaps. Now we move into pump as a service, and our wet dream is water as a service, where we take the full responsibility to make sure that water is available when needed. And if you think a little bit about that, water is maybe the one and only product that 100% of the end users actually need. So if we do not completely fuck this up, we could stay in business for quite a while. So that was very inspirational. But we can also see here on this picture that, you know, in the left area, the end user is doing very much themselves, and in the right area we do it, but we cannot do it ourselves. We need to build an ecosystem with partners to be able to provide such a services. So if you move into the next slide, one of the capabilities that we decided to build was to understand how ecosystems will form up and how we can take roles in ecosystems. Everyone talks about ecosystems these days, and that's kind of the answer to everything. But you need to understand what an ecosystem is, and you need to understand how to operate in an ecosystem. And this illustration shows that the fundamental of an ecosystem is that you have someone who is the driver. That's the D in this picture. And then you have a set of contributors that contribute into the ecosystem. It's like building a football team of players that all together try to win the game, and working around the same table, sitting solving the same problem. This is a new way of working, and it's a bit scary for the first times. But then when you see how impactful it can be, this is the only way to do it. So we have put a lot of efforts in, and if you swap slide, I will show you a few of the ecosystems that we have been creating. So one of the things we saw very disruptive happening in China was that the big digital players like Alibaba and others, they were truly now implementing smart city solutions. So they call their solution the smart city brain. They build a big digital brain that operates the city, connecting all the different infrastructures into one brain, so you can optimize among the infrastructure players. And when this happened, our existing go-to-market channel is worth nothing, because the water utility we sell to in our go-to-market channel, they will not have a say on what kind of systems they want to integrate or build in. It will come from the smart city provider. You need to be compatible to our brain. You need to implement this solution. So if you are not a partner to the Alibaba ecosystem, you could be out of business. So this is what Mads talked about, you know, to you, Jan. We may not be in business in 10 years if we don't understand digital. So what we quickly did was to team up with Alibaba. That's a good thing when you are the largest in your industry. You get attention from these big players that are even bigger than yourself. So they were eager to work with us to have the best digital solution for water infrastructure. If you take the next slide, you will see how this is just a picture of the teams working together. So the Grundfos team working together with the Alibaba team to create the water solution for smart cities in China. Next slide. We could see the same thing happening a bit slower in Europe and rest of the world, and we identified Siemens to be one of the potential ecosystem drivers, meaning that they will create an ecosystem, bringing players together to create smart factories and smart buildings and smart cities. And again, we have to be in that ecosystem. So we teamed up with Siemens last year. So here in the center of the picture, you can see Mads and the CEO of Digital Industries in Siemens signing the partnership between those companies, and we put teams together to start building solutions day 2. Next slide. These were example of 2 big companies, and I mentioned it is important to understand how to take positions in the emerging ecosystem. So that's what those represented. But the 2 following slides, they will contain inspiration on the importance of also working with smaller companies, companies like yours and for you, smaller companies. So these are just examples of how we have worked with a couple of small companies to increase innovation speed and innovation height. And this is our digital transformation office in Bjerringbro, where everything has been happening the last 3 years. An environment where there are no silos. It's full collaboration between IT and the sales and development and business development. So truly a high energy 2,000 square meter area that we use now for. This is a permanent institution now. We call it Digital Development Office these days. Next slide. So rounding off, this is the one-pager for a digital transformation. You need some guiding lights on where you're heading, what kind of capabilities do you need to build, and the timeline. So you put pressure on this. And as you can see, these are the 3 years we did our transformation in, and I my job as a change agent was dissolved on time, 2 years and 11 months after we started it. So it's possible to do it, and I think that has also been a key success factor to do it with that high speed.
Great. That was no, not the last one.
Yeah, this is just the last slide is just about how we believe that what will happen as a next step in the series of revolutions. We believe that the sustainability revolution will be the next revolution. So that's why we transform our company to become a sustainability company and be one of the winners in that case. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Melissa
so much.
Melissa has been following us in her PhD, and she has seen us from the inside. She has literally been living with us. I took her on board one of the first days in our transformation, and she has seen what we have been doing, and I have encouraged her to be extremely open and transparent on the things she have observed, things that have been successful, but also things that have been challenging for us as a company. So she will bring that to you.
Yes.
Great.
Thanks. So I wanted to just sort of, piggyback on some of the things you said that were kind of keywords that triggered some of the quite remarkable progress in the past 3 years. And you talked about this startup approach and this temporary aspect to it. And I thought that some of the things that might be helpful for people to understand is that you had quite some autonomy, but you also had parameters. And within that, I guess there's a tension and there's a balance in terms of getting the flexibility to explore, but then also minimizing the risk. and having those close ties to the core. All of these things are not necessarily easy to do in and of themselves. But you also brought on some new concepts about ways of working that some in the workforce found quite natural because they came from a software or a development background, and some of the workforce found quite difficult. Some of these agile concepts, for example, about fail fast to forward, and what does that mean, and what does it mean to have a minimal viable product when you're used to making the most incredibly high quality product before you put it out the door. And so this tension between this autonomy and then the connection to the core, and the danger of silos, because you created these cross-functional teams that were very blended. One of the reasons why when you first told me about the project was that you had seen that you could have done it three ways. It could have been outsourced to some, company in another country and let them just do it. It could have been brought on sort of as a collateral project within R&D or one of the other departments, IT. Or you could do it the way you ended up doing it, which was kind of this hybrid. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about those tensions and how you've sort of managed that, because that's, I think, a very key part.
Yeah, absolutely right. What we have seen in when we have talked to big players helping companies to go through this is that kind of 85% of the transformations fail. They run into the wall of some kind, and it's often the gravity of the mothership is super strong, and it's easy to fall back into business as usual. And we had big respect for that, but we also saw that Grundfos was very hungry on this transformation. Mads had done a great job, to talk about the importance of doing this. So it was a top-down action, so I think that was a key element, and if that was not the case, I would never have dared to do this task in that short time period. But since Matt was a super strong driver of this, that was a starting point. Then the leaders in the organization had the attention, from him. Okay, we need to do this, and then to avoid those conflicts, it's very important to be inclusive and to be transparent. So instead of we running away to Berlin and building this up, or San Francisco, we sat down in the center of Bjerringbro at the headquarters of Grundfos. That was against all best practices we could find back then. Really to say this is a Grundfos initiative, not a Fredrik initiative. So we sat down, we took an old factory. To be inclusive, we invited people, we created this open environment, and it's for Grundfos. Everyone who wants to contribute can come here. And I spent a lot of time to talk to the leaders around in the different functions. Guys, we are on this transformation. I need some of your best people to join my work. I'm not building a department, so I'm not stealing them from you. I just need to borrow them. So we introduced what we call secondment, where we borrow people from other departments. And that's something that is standard today in Grundfos. We talk about communities, we talk about seconded resources, we talk about cross-functional teams, where we populate the teams with representation from all the different departments, instead of having those silos. I think, and the dialogue with the people managers here were essential. In big organizations, they are called the permafrost, because they are the most difficult to change, because they have pressure both from up and from below to do a great job. So they are normally really restricted to change. But this way we managed to get them on board. We gave them back really motivated people. We gave them back attentions from the senior management that they were really heroes here, giving great people into this. So we kind of cracked that code and created those. And so we went from being, you know, like 10 people when we started off to quite fast growing to among 200 people sitting in this factory working on digital and nothing else. And I still hadn't hired more than 3-4 people, including you, Melissa.
So another thing I thought that would be really helpful for people to understand is you have accomplished a very fast pace. It's not normal for a lot of, especially a legacy company that's not used to moving quickly. And one of the things you've talked about is this parallel development situation. And I thought it could be helpful for you. You talked a little bit about this bridging, but that's really an important part of how you accomplished it. But also it's raised a lot of complexity. And so as a result, you needed to put a framework of governance somehow in there to help get rid of these dependencies that were created. And can you talk a little bit about that real fast?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that we addressed very, very early, and that was something I had seen when I was working in the IoT space, delivering technology to the big companies, that, as I mentioned, it was easy to do the experiments, but it was then difficult to put everything into scaling mode, and everyone should build their IoT platforms and so on and so forth. So, and that was also the case for Grundfos. When I came on board, we had a bunch of different IoT platforms that we were doing experiments on. And I said, if we are going to scale within 3 years, we need a robust infrastructure that is secure and safe and using standard protocols and you know, is built for the future. We will never be able to build something ourselves. We need to team up with partners. We need to take one of the big ones. It's either Microsoft, IBM, AWS, Amazon, or someone else. We need to team up with those. We cannot create this because they had tried to create it and failed in Grundfos. So that creates a big tension, because then we introduced the IT department. You know, IT department has to be part of this, and no one in a big company really appreciate the IT department. They are always big and slow, and they have unrealistic expectations on what we have to put in place. And when we talk to the IT department, they typically say that the business part of the company, they have unexpected, unrealistic expectations on how fast things can go and so on. We really need to do a great job. So there were big tensions among business and enabling technology. So I decided to address that very early and invited the IT department to come to the factory and sit among the teams. So we couldn't talk, because I heard that the teams, they were talking negatively about the IT department up on the mountain. They are slow and they are lazy and blah blah blah. And then when I talked to the IT, I heard the vice versa. So why don't I put them next to each other instead, so they cannot, you know, spend time on talking. Instead they have to solve it, you know. So that was a key success factor, to bring them together. And yes, it has been complicated because we decided to work with Microsoft, because we have a lot of other Microsoft products and offerings in our setup, and they have honestly been building their IoT setup in parallel with working with us. So we have been guinea pigs on that one. So it has been challenging, but also rewarding. Now we have a scalable platform that we both can run experiments on and scale offerings on very fast after successful. So the decision to go for a scalable setup was key, and for us to develop it at the same time as we developed the first offerings, where the first offerings had to be the, you know, guinea pigs on our infrastructure. So that a lot of tensions, a lot of challenges, but handled in a very attractive way. The teams have really been collaborating, and that has been the key to success.
I have one thing before you go, Fredrik. one thing that Melissa also takes up here, the minimal viable products or minimal viable services. How do you work with this concept in regard to involving your customers, or how have you done working with it?
Yeah, so I basically copied how we used to do it when I built startup companies. So when you start a new company, I would never do it if I didn't have a customer on board on my idea before I start taking on board costs. So why should it actually be different in a big company? Yes, we have more money, we have more resources. But why should we spend them if we don't know that we have a customer willing to pay for what we want to do? So in all the projects we started, it was mandatory to have a customer with us, at least one. So we really solved for the group of customers that we were addressing. So each project had daily customer dialogues on what to do, and then introducing MVPs instead of doing a full-fledged solution in that takes 3 years and cost a lot of millions. Let's do 6-month sprints, coming out with an MVP, working with the customer, trying it out. So we had to create a new process in Grundfos to be able to launch digital offerings in MVP state, because we didn't have that before. We were only having top-notch products that had taken 3 years to develop, and so we needed a new process, and we launched our first commercial offerings earlier this year based on that process. So we have kind of built the process in parallel with running the projects, and that has been also the only way to do it. If you try to create the process first and then apply it, the only thing it's not going to work. So we had to build it at the same time as we were running.
And I would just add that there's a couple of things that I think really were helpful, because there's this mindset of that you're working once that product is out the door with a hard product, it's out the door. But with digital, it's the beginning of a journey, and you've taken it that way. It's a journey, and it's ongoing. And so this is something, and it's not a product, it's a solution. And so when you're looking and you've brought your customers along as stakeholders in helping them define what the problem is and then how to work together on the solution, it seems like that's been part of the approach as well.
Yes, absolutely.
One thing I don't know, Fredrik, if you have time for more questions. Some of these questions on the screen here we have already been touched upon with the great questions from Melissa. But
I have bought myself a little bit more time, so I can stay on a little bit longer.
Okay, great. The thing is that I think you as I heard, you said that this was a top-down process at Grundfos. So Mads had the leader's attention, and you had, and also you got a budget, so the business leader wanted to work with you.
Yeah.
But what else have you done to create this shared why and shared how in the organization? I've heard this about you borrowed men, some of the best in the organization. But is there anything else at Grundfos you have? What about the communication in the company, the internal marketing, so to say?
Yeah. So I think transparency is a key ingredient. I want to to take the hype out of what we do, to open up the windows to anyone in the organization. So that's also why I created it in the center point of the headquarters. So we have had I stopped counting after 4,000 visitors in our digital transformation office. So that's how many people, both from inside and outside. We have had all the big corporates of Denmark have been there a number of times to follow how we have done our transformation. So we have been very much sharing both internally and externally. I have done very many presentations internally on department meetings and stuff like that to share this story and how we are progressing, the challenges we have, and the help I may need from them, and so on. So they feel, that they are doing it. It's not me doing it. I have just been a facilitator. They are doing it, and it's their jobs we are talking about. So they have been really, hungry to contribute. I think that's also key to the success.
Fredrik, you have a very democratized, I guess, approach, but also around that same time, you implemented something with this working out loud and the platform. I don't know if that's helpful to share.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So we use Jammer in Grundfos to openly share. So we created quickly a Jammer channel, and the illustration I showed earlier with the pump ordering its own spare part is the most shared post in Jammer in Grundfos all history. So that's how much attention we have got around the things we are doing. So we have a lot of people following us on Jammer to see what we are doing, and the people are posting a lot of things every day on how they are visiting customers, how the customers are putting inputs to our offerings, what works, what doesn't work. Every time we get a win on a sale. Well, I mean, we have been very, very transparent, and I think that's a recommendation.
Yeah, Fredrik, here in the things about the most difficult things or the challenges you had to break down. You said earlier that two capabilities that were quite tough to build up was go to market and as a service delivery.
Yeah.
This go to market culture and involving end users, has this been the hardest thing in your journey?
Yes, I would say so. And not in a negative way. I mean, a lot of people have really wanted to do it, but it is a very different thing selling pumps in boxes through distributors, talking about pump curves and prices, versus selling digital tools that you use for operating your business different. It's completely, you talk to a completely different customer. You talk with a completely new language and a completely new business model. So kind of very little of the big machine of going to market, 6,000 people selling Grundfos products was useful. And that's also what I have seen in other companies going through this, and also when Telenor acquired my company, we could see that we had to build almost an entire new sales organization selling the new stuff, and then we had to create smart incentives between the very many sales guys out selling the business as usual and the sales guys selling the new, so we could really create a win-win there, and that's what we have been spending a lot of time on. And it's the good thing is that those two capabilities are now components in our 2025 strategy. So we have VPs putting a lot of resources and funding into building the scalable version of go-to-market. So the way we have approached this is really to put strong leaders on VP positions behind building those capabilities, and that has helped me a lot. And then when I see that now those leaders are they know exactly what they are doing. They know how to do it. We have recruited very many of those from outside. So I think we have changed around 30% of the top leadership in the company during those years. Some changed naturally, but some we have, needed to change to get the type of leaders in that we need to become a digital company as well. So now when they, drive those capabilities, I have been able to step back more and more and see that, yes, I'm not needed anymore. Now I can go on to the next challenge.
Great. Thanks a lot, Fredrik. We have to pay attention to our timeline, and
I don't know, Jan, do we maybe have time for just one question from the audience?
Yes.
Because there is quite a few, so maybe just one single question. We have a question here, something concerning pricing for new digital services. It's a listener or viewer, Peter Lemke Frederiksen, who asks, could you say a few words about Grundfos' pricing model for digital services?
Yep, absolutely. We have really tried to come from the value perspective. So what kind of value are we creating? And then we have been discussing with our end users, are we seeing the same value being created, dear customer? Yes or no? So we kind of have created a joint view of the value. And then we have discussed how are we going to, what kind of business model are we going to, what can we put in place for you here, so we can charge you in a way that makes sense both for us. We kind of have we have worked together with the customers to put the price, not a cost plus approach that we are used to, more a value based pricing model. And then we have really focused on recurring revenues, meaning subscriptions. So we have a relationship with the end users. To Melissa's point of, this is just a starting point of a journey together where we constantly can upgrade with new features. So we have built a subscription management setup where we can switch on and off new features, and that affects the pricing. So if you really want this feature, you switch it on and the pricing will adjust. We can also use the new features as add-ons to keep customers, to keep the churn low on the offerings. So the customers stay on board. So we have built a customer success management function in Grundfos, working with the end users constantly to see that the pricing is right and that the offerings are used and that they create the value that they were intended to. So we constantly can navigate from those dialogues. That has been also very important in this journey.
And I would just probably say, maybe you could say a word about how big of an effort that ended up being, maybe even unintended, unanticipated in a way, in terms of connecting to those systems.
Yes. So that was also something that I had seen others struggle with. Typically, we big companies, we have SAP, and SAP is built for a business model where you get an order and then you send an invoice, and that's not how recurring revenues work. So, and yes, SAP and the others, they are working on features for this, but we had to find a partner who already had a solution for recurring revenues that could fit in between the CRM system and the ERP system. So we had to identify a partner and build a setup that worked together with our SAP system and our CRM system. So that was an exercise in itself, and I really recommend for those of you who have big systems that don't wait for the big providers to have something for you. Find it and implement it. That's the future of combining different solutions. Okay. And I'm happy to share how we did it for those who are interested offline.
Thanks a lot, Fredrik. Ulla, are there more questions on the chat we need? Are we moving on to Melissa's presentation now?
Well, there are a lot of questions, but I don't think, unfortunately, we have time if we also want to have Melissa's presentation.
But I think if Fredrik has time, it's certainly mine is very general. So if you want to do a couple more, it's fine. I can go fast.
Okay,
so.
Great. We have another question here. I think also a lot of people that want to know or want to be more digital have concerns about security. And we have a question from Henrik Olsen, who says, when the pumps are all connected via IoT, how do you ensure that unfriendly persons can take control of the pumps and create havoc?
Yep. A very good question, and this is also why I pointed out very early in our transformation, the scalability. We need when I say a scalable solution, I mean a global, secure setup that works independently on what country we are in. So that's why we put this big effort on building our digital platform together with Microsoft. And here, why should a company like Grundfos invent protocols and the security setups when this is a generic problem for anyone who wants to apply IoT? And so we made a clear distinction between enabling products and the offerings that we want to bring to market. So we put efforts on having our our IT department solving the enablers and the business and technology department to create the offerings. So that split was very good to make. And then my recommendation is to truly use standard IoT protocols. They are built to include security end to end, and they are built to include the technology needed to have a fully secured connection between the device and the cloud. And it is important to know that most hacks that are successfully done on any kind of IoT solution, they happen through the device. So that's why we have to be very cautious on how we design our devices connected to the IoT cloud. So here again, using Microsoft standard components was a very important step for us. The previous solutions we had built ourselves. I just hired in a number of hackers back then to show how unsecure solutions we have, and we didn't know that. We had been selling them for years, and luckily not in big volumes, but we had to do an activity to create security on already existing digital offerings before we went on this journey. So security, I mean, it's not an option that someone can hack a pump in a water infrastructure. It simply cannot happen. So we put quite a lot of efforts, but the answer is in the partnerships with the big ones. They have it. You don't need to do anything. You just follow their recipe.
Good to know. Thanks. More, Ulla?
See here. Okay, so we have one from Anders Djurso that has an understanding that you are kind of moving up the food solution chains here in your future, and in order to grow and increase earnings, he thinks that seems like a smart move. I suppose Grundfos then enters a new field of competitions against existing and older solution providers that until now has regarded Grundfos as a non-dangerous supplier or a sort of friend. Is that a valid concern? And does this concern pose a threat to existing sale of lower level products, pumps?
Yeah, so it's a very good question, and it's the reality. Yes, we are stepping into the territories of our customers to a certain degree. It's a deliberate choice we have to make to avoid the commodity trap that we were in. So we took the decision that it's better to step in and take some of our own business out through those customers to feed it into other parts of our business. So cannibalization on a deliberate choice. It has not been a revolutionary problem for us. It has been, addressed, but not to a degree where it has become a huge problem. It has been possible to navigate, and some of the customers that we have stepped into, we have been able to turn them into partners. And we have so we have had taken them a little bit case by case. It was a big perception that this would be super dangerous for us, and this will kill us if we start stepping into our customers' domains. But I would like to take the energy out of that dialogue a little bit. That hasn't been our main problem.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe Ulla, we'll move on now to Melissa. And Fredrik, thank you very much for your valuable insights from Grundfos. It's really nice that you would like to share these things with us. Thanks a lot.
Yes, thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, and I just to follow up with the questions that were on the screen, I think I will cover them. The intent for this part was really to do some very general kinds of overview about digital transformation, some definitions. Let me show you what I have in mind. So what I want to talk about, and then if I don't get to those questions in what we're going to talk about in the next few minutes, then let's come back to those. So so I want to tell you a little bit of some foundational things, and then why are we doing this now? Why is there so much hype about digital transformation now? And when people have been doing things with digital for quite some time. So what's different now, and so what does it mean to us and to perhaps to your company? And then with the research that I've been doing at Grundfos, I've with my supervisor have been looking into this idea of, well, how do you have a capacity to transform? What is transformative capacity? How can we characterize some of these aspects? And so I might pick up on some of the themes that Fredrik talked about, but I'm not going to go into any specifics about what happened or what is happening at Grundfos now that he's off the call. But let me start then, first of all, with just some very simple kinds of definitions, just so we're all on the same sheet. First of all, I mean, when you hear about some digitizing, that's where you're making the information so that it's in zeros and ones. I don't have it on the sheet here, but that's that's an important kind of foundational first step. But sometimes we're hearing about these smart technologies, and with these smart technologies, now we're talking about technologies that can communicate with each other. They have sensors, so they're able to be programmable, they're able to coordinate with each other. This is an important part then, because then when we're talking about digitalization, this is now the combinations between these smart technologies and the physical products and the services and the business models. The digitalization is required, for example, when you're trying to make that link that Fredrik was talking about, to change your enterprise systems from the old version that only could make an invoice once the item was sent out the door, to a version that is constantly being able to flex with the new conditions of the subscription services, and as your customers add features. That's one aspect of it in terms of sort of like the operational side, but it's also in terms of the products themselves and them being able to share information so that it's able to be used for analytics and predictive maintenance and these kinds of things, monitoring. So then there's in the academic literature, there's just you could just throw the spaghetti at the wall and get all kinds of definitions about digital transformation, depending on whether it's being defined by the ones who are in the information services field or from the innovation side. But what it really involves is this coordination and alignment of technology and actors, and in a response to creating, integrating, and using digital technologies for business purposes. That's the definition that that we've come to really rely on, because it seems like it gives it reflects the fact that, as Fredrik was saying earlier, this is not just about the technology, it's about the business. And I think, Jan, you said that too as well. So so why now? Okay, why is it that digital transformation is such a big deal now? And why? Because, for example, the first algorithm was created, or AI was created back in the 60s, and the first algorithm came around in 1980. So why now? And the reason is that it's the complementary technologies that came available in about 2016 that made a proliferation happen. That means that now people are able to connect with their digitalization technologies and AI at a level that has enabled an economic disruption. And so you can see, I just did this. If you're not familiar with Google Trends, it's really fun. You can go in and you can put your keywords in, and it'll tell you what's happened. And you can see that cloud platform technology took off around the same time as this discussion about digital transformation. And this is why so why should a company care about it? Okay, well, first of all, it's unavoidable. All of this connectivity, all of this use of artificial intelligence and predictive analytics and these kinds of things, we're connected with each other in new ways. And so when one part of the value chain digitalizes, it implicates the entire ecosystem. And so we're not individual actors anymore the way we might have been able to, as a company, proceed in the past. And so the other reason is that consumers are demanding it. You know, now that consumers are walking around with a personal computer in their hand that has more power than most of the computers had even a decade ago, and they have access to information, and they have access to user-friendly ways of connecting with their information that they think or might need or just be interested in at any given time. Now you have a different demand that's out there in the competitive environment. And you also have, especially for the larger firms, and I know that we have a mix in the audience, but you have very agile companies that are coming and are born digital, so to speak, that are able to be very fast and flexible. And it's an existential threat to a lot of firms that, as Mats Nipper had seen, could see that their market was going to disappear if they didn't do something about it. So that's the so what. But why? So the other part of the so what is that, my research has been with legacy firms. Grundfos is what I call a legacy firm. They had been doing hardware for years, and now they're doing these digital portfolios. So what does it mean, and how do they proceed? And you saw the slide that Fredrik presented, which was the core plus digital equals the new core. And what does that really mean? Well, this blending that's going on. This is this blending of not just the embedded electronics and the embedded connectivity into the hardware, so that it's communicating back to the organization, and the organization can take that data and can use it for understanding the environment, condition monitoring, for predictive analytics, predictive maintenance, etc. But it also means that now you have it's not just a project that you put into your research and development department and say, do this. It is permeating through every part of the organization. It's implicated, as we were talking about. That's why I was glad that Fredrik talked a little bit about this, just implicating the financial systems in terms of billing. These are things that often companies don't think about when they think, let's add something digital. They're thinking the product, the outcome, but the entire value chain is implicated, from the backbone to the offering itself. So this whole notion that in the past you might have had this one and done product that you put in the box, it was out the door, that's gone. Now with digital, out the door is the beginning, and you have to have ways to cycle in constant, continual support for the customer. Constant, continual information exchanges of the status and what's happening with that. And then you have to be able to reorganize inside to deal with that. Because, for example, as a developer, you might have an alarm that you've created so that whatever this embedded connected sensor is able to share. But as the developer, are you the one who's going to answer the alarm if it goes off? Probably not. Probably your company has a customer service department that is the ones who face the customer, and they need to know that the alarm went off, and they also need to know what to tell the customer to do about it, right? So you have to put this whole infrastructure in place so that you can get to the point where you're actually scalable and sustainable in those endeavors. So I think for a lot of the, at least from the literature and from the conversations, it's not a one and done change project either. A lot of folks think, okay, this is my transformation, I'm going to do it, it'll be done, and that's it. The transformation, to some degree, is iterative, it's continual. You're going to have to, connect systems in new ways and change things. And it will get to a new normal. But the other aspect of what we're facing in the environment is that things are changing so rapidly that as some of the experts that I've talked to have said, it's hard, in the old days, they could sit down and put a plan together and know that a year from now, they would expect that they would be able to have done this, this, and this. But now the time horizon is that they don't even necessarily know 3 to 6 months from now whether or not they are still going to be able to stick with that particular plan, or if a new technology will have come onto the market or become available that they need to now flex in order to incorporate into their plan. So these are very challenging aspects of it. So I wanted to talk about what kind of characterizes the capacity to deal with this, both from an organization perspective and then from the technology perspective. And I don't have a background in engineering, so I'm coming from this as an innovation management person. And so
Just a sec, Melissa, I'll just say that our time's running out now, but to the participants who have to leave, on our homepage, digitalbusinesstransformation.dk, you will be able to find the video of this webinar and also the slides, so you can go ahead and proceed, Melissa.
Perfect. And at the end of the slides, I also have my email. So if you want to follow up with a question, I'm very happy to connect with you. So I'll try to go fast because it's very quick. Fredrik already talked about some of the autonomy and the cross-functional aspects. But also there's this democratized, individuals are empowered to be searching for the solutions to make them happen. And then the agility and this idea that it's constant and continual. So these are aspects here. The other thing then on the technology side is this parallel development. So at the same time as making the digital platform, they're also making the applications that could go on the digital platform. At the same time as they're making the digital platform, they're also making the connections to the operational backbone that need to happen as well. So this parallel development is really critical. Then this is what I'm talking about in terms of the connections don't just go from the platform to the offering, they also need to go to the backbone. And then you have, as Fredrik introduced, you have connections to the ecosystem and to other potential partners, and they may have different ways of interfacing. And so you have to be able to think about that and think about what are those interfaces and how do we enable to connect to them. And so I think one of the very key things that we haven't talked about yet is this idea that this connectivity doesn't happen without data and AI readiness. And this involves that you have to have data that is findable and that's accessible and interoperable and reusable. It's called fair data. The other thing is that data is incredibly context-based. So you don't just create an algorithm by yourself if you're a data scientist. You must work together with the process owner to be able to create something that's meaningful. And so this is something that is very different from the way that development normally happens. And so the other part of it is this idea of modularity, and this is, Fredrik mentioned it, but it enables you to have some flexibility. But again, it's continuous and there are iterations that are involved here. So this is really the last slide, but this is the model that's in progress that talks about, somebody had asked the question, well, how do you get this shared understanding? And the shared understanding starts with vision. And there's a vision from the top down, which involves what has to happen. But then there's a vision that's happening from the bottom up. And these are the experts who are saying, how do we have to make this happen? It's not just a process issue. It's really about new ways of working, advocating for these, a traditional manager doesn't like redundancies, doesn't like to assign two people to a task. But with digital, you need both data scientists. Yeah, so choosing what to do, whether to do it yourself, what to outsource, as Fredrik had said earlier about partnering. Yeah, I think I got disconnected from the end of the video. So
okay.
Anyhow, that was it for me. Just the last is just to say again that well, can you see my slide or no?
Yeah, we can see you, but not your slides.
Okay. Well, the last slide I will just share is just to let's see, to make sure that you have my contact information. Yeah, and that's it. So I'm happy to take questions. I'm sorry we ran about 5 minutes long, but I'm very glad that Fredrik was able to spend a little bit more time, because I think, you know, he's the one who everybody really wants to hear from. So yeah, thank you very much.
Well, there's one question for me could be, you mentioned the legacy firms, also Grundfos is one of them. So what's the difference, or how do you find out whether about this legacy, and also the methods you have to use to succeed with your digital transformation? Are there any factors, indicators you can, like, okay, or is it really a cultural thing about what people say and do? Yeah,
so when I talk about a legacy firm, I'm talking about an older firm that's used to doing non-digital portfolios. And then how do you then blend when you're adding a digital portfolio? Because a success factor is that it's a blend. Most of these bigger companies, they're not going to just turn digital. They're going to still maintain their original product lines. And so it's a way of embedding agile ways of working, which are very different from the traditional ways of working. For example, traditional company may use a waterfall method for its management and development and stages, and, you know, very strict kind of guidelines on quality and deliverables before you can move from one stage to the next. Whereas with an agile way of working, you're on a very thinking about a Scrum method, for example, where you're working in sprints, and so you're constantly reevaluating, can we still do this now? Who else is being implemented or rather implicated in what's happening now? Do we have new dependencies that have shown up? Do we have to put some things on the shelf and come back to them later? It's called a backlog. These are different ways of working, but they're very helpful in terms of when you're trying to be fast. So there's also a really, I think it's important to focus on the fact that when you add digital to your processes, it's unsexy, right? I mean, everybody wants the product. They want the digital product, but you have to build those unsexy competencies as well, with the data and AI readiness, with your process, you know, your systems that are upgraded so that they can communicate with the digital platform. And this takes a lot of effort and time that I think is often not taken into it. Yeah, so I don't know if that answers the question, but
yeah, it does. So what, in your opinion, what are the benefits working agile and not from a stage gate model or waterfall development model?
Yeah, there are benefits to both. I mean, it depends what you're trying to do. In the case that I've been looking at, it's a blended version, so that there are some things you just are working so quickly, and you need to be able to make sure you don't have these interdependencies, these vertical dependencies. But on the other hand, you also need to be able to get to a point where, especially if you're working in parallel and you're needing one project relies on the other to be to a certain point by a certain point, then it's important that you have some sort of waterfall stages that you're looking at as well. That's not my area of expertise. There's probably folks on the phone who could answer that better, but that's my impression.
I think you said something really important, that you constantly after a sprint stops and focuses on the important thing here before you move on. So it's really a strict method to move forward.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've really noticed that's super important in terms of this digitalization and what characterizes capacity is alignment. And so you need to be able to align. You need to first of all understand where are you trying to align to, and it's very complex with digitalization, because you're trying to make sure that you can interface and align with your potential customers, with your partners, your suppliers in your ecosystem, but also inside you're needing to align with the marketing department, with the customer service. You need a way to front the customer in a way so that they're not getting 15 different types of systems attached to whatever the new feature or offering is that you're providing for them. So this takes a lot of coordination as well. Yeah, the other thing is that again, somebody had asked a question, well, how do you get this shared understanding? And part of that is that you're building the practices from the ground up. That's the vision from the bottom up. But you also have the big picture, what needs to happen from the top down. That's the vision. And this customer engagement is super important, because when the customer is helping you understand the solutions you're trying to offer, then everybody can be on the same boat, so to speak, I guess.
So use these case stories also in your organization. Communicate this customer, the added value for this customer is this. It gets more tangible for the organization.
Yeah, so I think that's super important. It's important messages that you can build for the customer, but it's even more important as you're trying to figure out what to do next. There was an analogy that I saw someplace that really made a lot of sense. And sometimes you can't figure out how to get across the whole pond. You just have to get to the next stepping stone without sinking, and then figure out where you have to go from there. And in order to do that, so that you don't also have to backtrack without losing ground, you need to capture the learnings. You need to be able to make what the data scientists call use cases, so user cases. And then every time, then they build up some understanding of what worked and what didn't work. And then they're capturing it in playbooks so that you don't have to recreate that experience of the first time again. And that's really important, and it takes a lot of energy and effort. And I think that, again, it's the unsexy stuff that really is going to make the difference between scalability and sustainable scalability or not. So.
Great. Thanks a lot, Melissa. I don't know, is there anyone on questions from Melissa? You said that word. Thank you, Pete. Yeah. Otherwise, I would like to take over the screen, Melissa here, and just.
Do you have it?
Yeah, I think I have it here. Thank you. And hopefully no videos now. And you can see here was the questions. I would just like to round up here and tell you that if you want to hear more about digital business development, on the 27th of May, Manufacturing Festival is going to be held online. And the second track, we have digital business development in Danish production companies. And that's a track we are organizing. So please, you're most welcome to register for the event online. Yeah, you have the home page where you're going to register at the bottom there. I would say it's a very interesting case with the Horny, the company that produces ovens to the industry, how they now deliver digital content to their customers, these industry cooks, so that they not just living a hardware, also a connected oven. That's an interesting case story, I think. But also we are involved in other projects also for the Danish Industry Foundation, Servitize DK. If you need inspiration to which services to develop, you're most welcome to contact us to be part of this Servitize DK. It's possible for you to have 80 hours with either Force Technology or Danish Technological Institute. And you're also most welcome to contact me afterwards if you want to hear more about digital transformation. My contact information is here, and I think Ulla said, well, the presentation is also going to be available on our webpage, digitalbusinesstransformation.dk.
Yes, we will put it on the webpage as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think that's it for me, Ulla and Melissa. I don't know if you have anything to add here in the end. Is your PhD or a smaller version of your PhD going to be available sometime in the near future?
Knocking wood, I should be finished on the 1st of December, so we'll see. I'll have to defend at that point, but there's some articles that I'm in the process of writing. One is about this transformative capacity. Another is about in the workforce participation. And the third one I'm looking into, I still have to write, is about the digital thread to make these connections. And if anybody out there is involved with digital thread, I would love to hear from you. So yeah, but thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Melissa. I think that's it for now, and thank you everyone for participating today. Sorry we got a bit over time. I think it's tradition with these webinars, yeah. But thanks a lot and have a good day, everyone.